Hey everyone, I wanted to record this video to show you something that I found about Turbo that was a tiny bit surprising at first, but then it made a lot of sense, but it kind of stumped me for a while. So I was working on this app and I recreated some of the behavior in a very, very simple Rails application to understand what was going on. I actually tend to do that a lot. I start new Rails app to understand something, so it's a little tip there. So the app, it's a very, very simple thing. So let me just refresh this page. It's just an app that creates comments. So you type something, let's say hello, hello, and click create message, and the page refreshes, and the comment is here. It's at the bottom. We don't really care too much about that at the moment. But that's how this test app starts. The behavior that I want is whenever I create a new comment, so second comment, I hit return, I don't want it to jump to the top. So that is very straightforward nowadays with Turbo. So the first thing, let me just walk you very quickly through how the app is structured. So I have this controller, that's the working controller that has this working show template. And I have a failing controller to simulate the failing test case. So in the working controller, I've got this show action that renders this thing to the right. Very, very vanilla Rails, straightforward. I have a form with a model, a button, and then some messages get rendered. That's very, very simple. So the first thing that we want is for the page to stay put whenever we create a new message. So that is super simple. I'm gonna go ahead and copy and paste something very, very straightforward, very simple. In Turbo, we now have this new method called Turbo refreshes with that sets up a couple of meta tags with directives to tell Turbo what to do when a page is refreshed. One of the attributes is scroll. The other one is how to change the page, how to make that change, either a replace or a morph. So how can you tell where this is all coming from? Let me just walk you through the repo for Turbo Rails. So because this is a helper that you use in your views, that usually ends up in the app folder of any gem you would like to go to. So here, let's go to the to this thing here. So app helpers over here in Turbo, and I believe this is a drive helper. So I'm gonna click over there. I'm gonna scroll a little bit, and hey, Turbo refreshes with. You can go and read this whole thing on your own time, but here you can see that there is an argument for the method that you can use to replace the page, to replace the content that's coming in, and a different one for how the page will behave in terms of scroll. So what I want to do is for the scroll to be preserved. So I'm going to use this attribute here, this option. So let's verify that that's in our code for a sec. Yes, we added that. We want the scroll to be preserved. And if you go back to Safari and reload this page and scroll a little bit and create a new comment, this should not scroll. And hit return. And it doesn't. So the page is completely replaced, and we should see this comment at the bottom. Hey, this should not scroll. That's perfect. That's what we want. So in the app that I was working with, I wanted to augment the experience a little bit, and I wanted for these comments to be on a turbo frame. That's because I wanted to add some filtering to that turbo frame. So that's what this second URL is simulating. So if we refresh this page for a sec, there are a bunch of comments here as well. And the idea for this is that the user comes in and then they should be able to somehow filter these. But the behavior for the page should stay the same. So I thought, okay, so that should be pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna here in the failing show template, I'm just gonna add a turbo frame with a source to the messages path, just a controller that will render the messages, same as the other one. And I will add the turbo refreshes with scroll preserve, and that should do it. And then if we try it out and say this really doesn't work. Oh, doesn't work. It jumps to the top. And this was super surprising to me because I was sure that I was adding the directive for the scroll to be preserved. And my first hunch was this is a bug in Turbo. Like, I made it, I found a bug, I'm gonna post a fix for this, and I'm gonna be a contributor. So that's why I made this whole test case. So in doing this, in trying to understand what the problem was, I did a couple of things to figure it out. So the first thing I did was that in the application HTML, I just added some styles for me to be able to see the turbo frame, right? That's step number one. So if we refresh the page, now we have this highlight around the turbo frame just to make it easier to reason about the whole layout of the page. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was in the messages controller that is hit by this turbo frame, I added a little bit of a sleep. And adding this sleep here was the perfect way to understand what was going on. So let me show you and see if you can catch it. So I'm gonna refresh the page, the title and the form load, and then the rest of the comments load. So what happens if, even if I have the scroll preserve directive there, what happens if I create a comment? So this should not scroll. So I hit return, it does scroll, it takes a little bit to load, and then we see the comment. And if you haven't figured it out yet, here is the explanation. So what's happening is that the page that comes back from the server when you create a comment, so let me create one and see if I can explain it. 1, 2, 3. While this comes back, the page is this big, like it's only this pixels like height, tall. I mean, so Rails is doing what we're telling it to do, or Turbo is doing what we're telling it to do. We're telling it, hey, you should preserve the scroll. But if the page is now way smaller, way shorter because of the content, well, it cannot preserve the scroll. So then to further prove this thing, this behavior that I found, I added something to the turbo frame. So if we go to the failing show and add a block, sorry, I thought this would be done automatically by RubyMine. So I added just a style, a p tag, a paragraph with double the height of the browser just to make it super explicit, and some background just to see it in action. So if we go to the failing case again, there it is. Like it's very long, and then it swaps the content. So why is this useful? Because if we scroll a little bit and then add a comment, we'll see that we're not going to jump back to the top because this loading state of sorts that we have in the turbo frame will add some height to the incoming page. So if I hit return, we're not going to see the title because this thing is now taking up some space. And then we see the messages coming in. So how do we actually fix this? So I'm going to remove this for a sec. So before I do this, I want to just recap and say that the whole problem was my assumption about how replace works. For a second, I thought that it would just replace what I was seeing, but what I'm seeing is not entirely correct because when the page comes in, it's going to be shorter. So it's also like a thing about my development environment being so fast. I cannot tell like the different time that things take to get to the browser. So if I wanted to replicate this same feeling of the working page where I add something and then it stays put with the fact that I have a turbo frame here, the fix is actually to add the second argument to this. So let's go back to the docs just to be super explicit about how this works. So method morph. So we're going to use the morphing feature of Turbo Rails. I'm not going to go too deep into how that works. Maybe I'll do that at some other time. But basically what that's going to do is that it's not going to take the incoming response right away, but it's going to tell both the page and the frame to make sure that they morph. So let's see. Maybe I'm getting that a little bit wrong. Let's wait for a sec because I didn't prepare for this little bit. So let's keep this leap for now. And if we create a comment, 1, 2, 3 should morph. What we should see is that the page that doesn't jump, and the comment is added to the bottom. So let's see if I'm actually right. Oh no, it jumps. I missed one bit about this, which is good that I actually ran into this. So we're telling the page to morph, but we can also tell the turbo frame tag to do so as well. So if we go, let's see if we can find this in the docs. I actually didn't prepare this, so this is going to be me actually figuring this out with you here. Let's see if we can find in the frames helper. So for the turbo frame tag, let's see if we can find morph here. It's not. So I actually, let's go back. So then let's go to the turbo documentation. And let's go to the reference for turbo frames. And let's see, we should see morph here. Right, cool. So this is something that maybe it's actually missing from the documentation in the Turbo Rails gem, but turbo frames also have an attribute of morph that you can use. So if we go to our code and over here add, again, that is refresh morph. What this is going to do is that it'll sort of coordinate all of the changes that need to happen in the page so that both the page and the frame morph when the response is coming in. So hopefully this is going to work. Again, this has this little 3-second sleep. So if I scroll and add a comment, and this really shouldn't scroll. 1, 2, 3, let's hope this works. It stayed put. And if we go to the bottom and 3 seconds pass, this here really shouldn't scroll. And that's it. So what did I learn from all of this is that when going from just a replace to a replace with turbo frames, then the story is a little bit different. And that is where morph comes into play. It makes it so that you have that same very transparent experience as a developer, and you just let Turbo coordinate all of the morphing that needs to happen, not just in the page level, but at the frame level. So I hope that was helpful for you as it was for me, and maybe I'll see you in the next video. Bye.